Hey, folks, this clip is brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ. That is Farm Bureau Health Plans. In recruiting, it was a big week for Tennessee. I would say no single prospect that Tennessee got this week was a giant splash, but as a whole, it equaled a big week of recruiting for Tennessee. And I think that the headliner here is 2024 offensive lineman, I believe, from Fort Collins, Colorado, Gage Ginther. Then you had 2024 offensive tackle Jesse Perry, and then 2025 defensive back Shamar Arnaud, who committed to Tennessee. Probably not going to have a ton to say about the 2025 guy. It's just so far into the future, although a great pickup. Obviously, any defensive pickup for Tennessee at this point is amazing, and I love it. And he's, I believe, the first commit for the 2025 class, and that's great. We're probably going to concentrate more on these 2024 pickups because that class, it's starting to take shape. And Tennessee is a top 7 right now. I believe they are the number 7 class in America on the 247 Sports Composite the last time I looked. Now with those two guys in the boat, what'd you think of these pickups, Zach?
I mean, my view on it might not be as popular as some because I think you're getting into a scenario here with Tennessee where you're going to have a few of those hidden gems every class, and I trust in Josh Heupel and his staff's ability to evaluate players and bring the right guys in. But ultimately, I don't think you're going to beat Georgia consistently until you're out recruiting them. And landing some of these lower 3-star guys that might be hidden gems, diamonds in the rough. I feel like you get 1 or 2 of those each class. And now Tennessee's got, 3 of them at the bottom of their class, including 2 of the guys pretty much that committed this past weekend. I mean, they're ranked in the 700s. And I know recruiting rankings aren't the end all be all, but I don't know. Like, I'm kind of skeptical of, is this enough to go beat Georgia? Because Georgia's going to have offensive linemen ranked in the top 100, and talent is talent. It's hard for me to reconcile that this is going to be what it takes to beat Georgia.
I would generally agree with that. I mean, somebody says it in the comments here, and it's true. Is the number 1 player from Colorado in Ginther. But also, you take that all in totality. You are probably right. These players are not on that same level as what Georgia's pulling in, as what Alabama's pulling in, and that you have to get those dudes to beat them consistently. Obviously, Alabama had so much more talent than Tennessee did this season, and you beat them. It's absolutely possible, and the way that Josh Heupel coaches is made to sort of play over your head.
Well, I think Heupel outcoached Saban.
Yes,
Alabama fans might not like it, but I mean, you pretty much heard Saban say it in a sense where they didn't have an answer. They made adjustments that didn't work. Kirby, on the other hand, Georgia outcoached Tennessee that game. I don't think you can argue
outsmarted. That's what you're about to say. I could.
Yeah. I had to stop myself there.
He did. Unfortunately, he did.
Yeah.
And so, these pickups individually, I hope that they are the diamonds in the rough. It is the number 1 player from the state of Colorado. That's great. I really like the players that they are getting, and you've already seen it multiple times with Heupel, where they've gotten guys where when they first committed to Tennessee, they're like a 3-star, and then by the time the end of the class came, they were rated far higher. Yeah, Mr. Jones says it here. Nathan Laycock started out as a 3-star, and he ended up being rated higher than some of the super highly coveted guys that a lot of people want. Carnell Tate. Shout out to Ohio State there. Yeah, he ended up ranked higher than Carnell Tate. And
that is a good point. I mean, we do kind of have to wait and see how these guys finish.
It is a long game as far as this goes, and the evaluation from Heupel and his staff so far. Who am I to question it? They went 11-2 last season. What am I supposed to say? Was good enough for the second best record in the SEC. So I think that speaks for itself. But as far as that goes, to get back into that elite echelon, it is always going to come down to getting those elite players
Yeah.
consistently, at least some of them.
I mean, just look at Georgia whenever Tennessee played them last season, when you got massive dudes like Jalen Carter and Broderick Jones, in the trenches. You have to have a guy, an answer for those guys. And it's just hard unless they're those elite defensive linemen and offensive linemen. And I mean, that's
Yep.
what it's going to take eventually.
Exactly. Now, I think I said this a couple of weeks ago. I might have said last week, but the fact is this: you slayed the Alabama Dragon, and that's great, and it's an amazing place to start. And I think it absolutely directly led A to B to some big recruiting pickups in this class. I think it absolutely did. You have to keep winning games like that, and eventually, you keep winning those games. Obviously, the recruits are going to look and they're going to go like, well, if I go to Alabama, I'm going to lose to Tennessee. So I'm just going to go to Tennessee. Eventually that will happen. And it comes down to this. And this is true for every single team that isn't Georgia. Somebody's got to beat Georgia. You got to beat them. Because every single kid is always going to look when they have the choice between Georgia and whatever school you root for, if it's Tennessee or somebody else, they're always just going to go look and go, well, Georgia literally lost to no one. So I'm going to go there. Like, that's the fact of the it makes me want to crawl in a hole and vomit that Georgia is this good, but
And
they are.
You've got to land some of those elite guys from Georgia too, like the Eric Berries that it used to be at Tennessee. Like you can't beat. There's just not enough talent in Tennessee. I mean, there's more talent in Tennessee than there used to be, but it's still not the same level as Georgia. You've got to be able to get those guys, and you cannot do that until you beat Georgia. Like, it's just not going to happen. To your point, why would an in-state kid from Georgia pick Tennessee over Georgia at this point?
Farm Bureau Health Plans has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years, and much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200 plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ. Farm Bureau Health Plans. Yeah, it just it is what it is, as frustrating as that answer may be. But until then, I do think that finding the diamonds in the rough, developing guys, evaluating as well as you can, because Tennessee, largely with the resources they have, you're going to be able to win a lot of those mid-size recruits. You have an incredible NIL setup. You have one of the most impressive fan bases. In my opinion, the most impressive fan base in all of college football. And that's going to sell itself. But at a certain point, to get to that elite status, it is beating Alabama consistently. It is not falling behind Florida or whoever else. And it is eventually beating Georgia. Obviously, that is an unbelievably tall task with the way that team is built at the moment. But that is what it's going to take to get back there. But I like where Tennessee is at recruiting wise. It is just not, it's not blowing me out of the water, but it's not disappointing me either at almost at all. Obviously, it was a top 10 class. It was the number 10 class, I think, in on multiple platforms this last season. And so you're right there. Clemson has won national championships with talent like that. But I also think that these Georgia teams are stacked maybe even better than those Alabama teams that Clemson.
Well, they're built, and this Georgia team's also built to beat Tennessee. I mean, I'm not saying that's why Kirby Smart built his team this way, but the way that they are built, I mean, it's kind of Tennessee's kryptonite. They have this just really dangerous defensive front where they can get this pressure without having to bring the extra linebackers or DBs, and they can kind of sit back in coverage and shut down that part of the game, and then they get consistent pressure. I mean, that's the big secret to beating Tennessee. Pittsburgh used the same strategy. They just didn't have the dudes that Georgia had, and that's why Tennessee was able to beat Pittsburgh.
It's the only true way to stop Josh Heupel's offense is that you have to be able to get home with 4 guys and 4 guys only. You have to be able to drop back enough into coverage so that you don't just get, cracked over the top or whatever else Josh Heupel draws up there, you have to just be able to get into the backfield efficiently and consistently with only 4 dudes. And Georgia can do that. I mean, again, it is what it is, and I hate it so much. I cannot describe to you how much I hate it, because they're like, to me, like, Georgia's athletic program is so sorry outside of football. Like, Tennessee beat their basketball team by like 45 points this season. Like, they're just, and they were a nothing. They went and hired the guy that Florida wanted to fire for basketball.
Danny White's brother.
Yeah, it is. In fact, I think Tennessee has the superior White at the moment, but that's a funny way to say that. The better White brother at the moment. But I don't know. Outside of beating them, I don't know how you get back into that elite recruiting spot. So we'll see. But as I said, I like where Tennessee is recruiting wise. But does it instill confidence in me of like, oh yeah, in 3 years Tennessee is going to be right where Georgia is? No, it just doesn't. And I don't know how anyone could say that necessarily. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But you just eventually have to win those games, just like Heupel did this last season. I mean, we were all saying like, eventually you're going to have to beat Alabama again. Well, he did that, and you've crossed that hurdle, and it won you recruits. Now it becomes, eventually you got to beat the guy down 75, and
you can't ignore the fact that, okay, you beat Alabama. This year's game will be it'll be a toss-up game. You go in Tuscaloosa, it's a close game. Nobody's going to bat an eye if Alabama wins. Tennessee's proven they can also beat Alabama. So, we'll see how that goes. I think the same goes for the Georgia game, even though it's in Knoxville. That Florida game in Gainesville, though, I feel like that's a must-win game for Tennessee this season. I feel like to really take the program to the next level, you have to go win at Florida. You have to beat this Florida team that's not that good right now. They didn't have a great season last year. They haven't had a great offseason. They've done okay in recruiting. They've also had some not so great moments like the Jaden Rashada deal. Fans are kind of still on the fence about Billy Napier. If it's another 6-6 year, I mean, Florida goes through coaches almost as fast as Tennessee. They fired Jim McElwain after back-to-back SEC East Division titles. They fired Dan Mullen 2 years after an 11-win season. They will fire Billy Napier if he doesn't take a big step forward this season. Tennessee's lost this game many times before. They lost it when Will Muschamp was there. They lost it when Jim McElwain was there. They cannot lose that game this season if they really want to take a big step forward. So I feel like Alabama and Georgia games get a lot of attention, especially for the recruiting aspect. I think that Florida game is one that, Tennessee fans really can't overlook.
Absolutely. A little bit of a problem for a day that's down the road a little bit closer to the season, but point still stands. To get to that point, you're going to have to either win those games or somehow win those battles. I mean, maybe just more shameless NIL spending. I don't know. Maybe that can help some.